The conference hall at Quantico fell silent. 200 women, officers, enlisted, civilians, leaned forward in their seats as the moderator asked the question everyone had been waiting for. Mrs. Blackwell, is it true you single-handedly incapacitated 6 United States Marines in under 5 seconds? The woman at the podium was 56 years old, silver threaded through her dark hair, pulled back in a practical bun. Her posture was ramrod straight, despite the civilian clothes she wore. When she smiled, it didn't quite reach her eyes. Not single-handedly, Nora Blackwell said quietly. Someone believed in me when no one else would. She paused, her gaze drifting past the audience, past the walls of the auditorium, past 3 decades of memory. Let me tell you about the winter of 1993. The Mountain Warfare Training Center sat 8,000 feet above sea level, where the Sierra Nevada mountains clawed at the sky like broken teeth. Snow came early that year. By November, the high peaks were already buried under 12 feet of powder, and the wind off the ridgelines could strip flesh from bone. Corporal Nora Blackwell stood at attention in the company formation, her breath forming white clouds in the sub-zero air. She was 25 years old, 5'4", 128 pounds, soaking wet. Around her, 200 Marines stamped their feet and blew into their gloved hands, waiting for the company commander to begin morning roll call. She didn't stamp, didn't fidget. She'd learned years ago in the mountains of West Virginia that movement meant wasted energy, and wasted energy meant death. The other Marines didn't know what to make of her yet. She could feel their eyes sliding past her in formation, dismissing her as an administrative error. A woman, in a combat training unit, it had to be some kind of mistake. It wasn't a mistake, but it was definitely a secret. 3 months earlier, on October 3rd, 18 American soldiers had died in Mogadishu, Somalia. Black Hawk Down. The images had played on every television in America. Bodies dragged through streets, Rangers pinned down in a city they didn't understand, fighting an enemy they couldn't see. The Pentagon had questions, hard questions about training, about preparation, about whether the United States military was ready for the kind of warfare the 21st century was going to demand. One of those questions, whispered in closed-door meetings and buried in classified memos, was about women. Women had driven trucks in Mogadishu, fixed helicopters, treated the wounded. They'd been close to combat, closer than anyone wanted to admit. And some general somewhere had asked the question that terrified the old guard. If women are already that close to the fighting, what happens when we need them in it? The Marine Corps had answered with this: a pilot program, unofficial, unacknowledged. One woman integrated into a mountain warfare training unit to see if it was even possible. If she washed out, the program disappeared. If she succeeded, well, nobody had really thought that far ahead. Nora Blackwell was that woman, and she was already failing. "Corporal Blackwell!" The voice cut across the formation like a whip crack. Lieutenant Colonel Wade Ashford stood at the front of the company, his face carved from granite and weathered by 23 years of service. Gulf War veteran, Ranger qualified, 2 Bronze Stars. He looked at Nora the way a farmer might look at a diseased crop. "Yes, sir," Nora's voice carried across the frozen parade ground without a tremor. "Explain to me why your rucksack inspection failed this morning." She felt 200 pairs of eyes turn toward her. Her jaw tightened. "Sir, my ruck was packed to standard." "To standard?" Ashford's voice dripped with contempt. "Your ruck was 15 pounds under regulation weight. In mountain warfare, that 15 pounds could be the difference between mission success and dead Marines. Do you understand that, Corporal?" "Yes, sir." "I don't think you do." Ashford stepped closer, his boots crunching in the snow. "I think you packed light because you're hoping we'll go easy on you. I think you believe that because you have a different set of parts, you get a different set of rules." Nora's hands clenched at her sides. She kept her eyes fixed on a point 6 inches above Ashford's head. "No, sir, I packed to standard weight as specified in the training manual, sir. The manual. Ashford smiled, and it was a cruel thing. The manual was written for Marines, Corporal, not for whatever experiment the Pentagon thinks you represent. Somewhere in the formation, someone coughed to cover a laugh. Ashford turned back to address the company. This program is about one thing and one thing only: combat effectiveness. We don't have time for politics. We don't have time for social experiments. We have time to train Marines who can fight and win in the most hostile environment on Earth. If you can't meet that standard, he glanced back at Nora, you don't belong here. He dismissed the formation. 200 Marines scattered toward the mess hall, their voices rising in the cold air. Nora stood alone for a moment, watching them go. Rough morning, Corporal. The voice came from behind her. She turned to find Master Sergeant Silas Hartwick standing in the shadow of the supply building. He was 58 years old, though he moved like a man 20 years younger. His face was all hard angles and old scars, and his eyes were the color of flint. Nora came to attention. Master Sergeant, at ease. Hartwick moved closer, his boots silent in the snow despite his size. That ruck inspection was bullshit, and we both know it. Ashford's looking for reasons to wash you out. Yes, Master Sergeant. Nora kept her voice neutral. Hartwick studied her for a long moment. You know why they picked me to run this training cycle? No, Master Sergeant. Because I'm old. Because I'm 3 months from retirement. Because if this program goes sideways, I'm the sacrifice they can afford to make. He paused. They told me you'd quit in the first week. Then they said 2 weeks. Now we're 6 weeks in and you're still here. I don't quit, Master Sergeant. No. Something flickered in Hartwick's eyes. Not quite approval, but close. No, I don't think you do. Your file says you grew up in West Virginia, coal country. Appalachia, Master Sergeant, near the Monongahela National Forest. Your father was Walter Blackwell, Army Ranger, Grenada, 83. Nora's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to know. Yes, Master Sergeant, he died when I was 7. I know. Hartwick's voice softened just slightly. I was there. Different unit, but I was there. Your daddy was the best damn tracker I ever served with. Could move through jungle like a ghost. Could read terrain like other men read books. He met her eyes. You got his blood, Corporal. I can see it in how you move, how you watch. But blood isn't enough in this world. You understand me? Yes, Master Sergeant. Good. Hartwick glanced toward the mess hall, where the rest of the company had disappeared. There's a group of 6 Marines in your unit, Sergeant Rick Donovan's crew. Gulf War vets, every one of them. They think women in combat is a joke. They think you're a liability, and they're going to make your life hell until you quit or they break you. Nora's jaw set. They can try, Master Sergeant. They will try. And when they do, you remember something. Your daddy didn't survive Grenada by being the biggest or the strongest. He survived by being smarter, faster, more precise. Hartwick started to walk away, then paused. North Ridge, tomorrow at 0200. Come alone. And Corporal? Yes, Master Sergeant. Don't tell anyone, not even the ones you think you can trust. He disappeared into the gray morning like smoke. The mess hall smelled like powdered eggs and burned coffee. Nora moved through the chow line in silence, acutely aware of the conversations that stopped when she passed, the eyes that followed her to an empty table in the corner. She'd eaten alone for 6 weeks. It didn't bother her anymore. Halfway through her breakfast, a tray slammed down across from her. She looked up to find a young Marine, 19, maybe 20 years old, with red hair and freckles that made him look even younger. His name tape read, Mercer. Mind if I sit, Corporal? Private First Class Declan Mercer didn't wait for an answer. He was already sitting, attacking his eggs with the enthusiasm of someone who'd skipped dinner the night before. Nora glanced around. 3 tables away, Sergeant Rick Donovan sat with his crew. 6 combat veterans who'd been making Nora's life miserable since day 1. Donovan was watching them. His eyes were cold. "You should probably sit somewhere else, Mercer," Nora said quietly. "Yeah, probably," Declan kept eating. "But I figure if I'm going to wash out of this program, might as well be for something that matters. Sitting with me isn't worth washing out for. Maybe not to you." Declan finally looked up, and there was something fierce in his young face. "But I joined the Corps to be a Marine, not to be part of some boys' club that's scared of change." Before Nora could respond, a shadow fell across their table. She looked up to find Donovan standing over them, his arms crossed. He was 31 years old, 6'2", 220 pounds of muscle and scar tissue. Gulf War infantry, 3 confirmed kills, the kind of Marine who made drill instructors smile. "Private Mercer," Donovan's voice was quiet, which made it more dangerous. "Did you get lost on the way to your assigned seating?" Declan's jaw tightened, but he met Donovan's eyes. "No, Sergeant." "Then why are you sitting with the experiment?" "Because I wanted to, Sergeant." Donovan's smile was thin. "You wanted to? Well, isn't that special? You know what I want, Private? I want Marines who understand that in combat, you don't get to pick your team based on feelings. You pick based on who can keep you alive." He leaned closer. "Tell me, Private, if you're pinned down and taking fire, who do you want next to you? A combat-tested grunt like me, or a 120-pound girl who got here because some Pentagon politician wanted to make a point?" Nora set down her fork carefully. "Sergeant Donovan, the private is allowed to sit wherever he wants." "Oh, she speaks." Donovan turned his attention to her, and there was genuine contempt in his eyes. "You know what your problem is, Blackwell? You think this is about you. It's not. It's about the Marines who are gonna die because command puts you in a position you can't handle." "I can handle my position, Sergeant." "Can you?" Donovan straightened. "Prove it. Winter warfare exercise, next week. You're gonna lead your fire team through a tactical problem. I'm gonna be on the opposing force. We'll see how well you handle your position when the bullets start flying." He walked away. His crew followed him, their laughter echoing off the mess hall walls. Declan let out a breath he'd been holding. "You all right, Corporal?" Nora picked up her fork. Her hand was steady. "I'm fine." "That guy's a piece of work. That guy's a combat veteran who's seen things we haven't. He's earned the right to his opinion. Even if his opinion is wrong?" Nora looked at the young Marine across from her. "Especially then, because the only way to change someone's mind is to prove them wrong. Not with words, with action." She didn't tell Declan about the meeting with Master Sergeant Hartwick. Didn't mention the North Ridge or the O200 rendezvous. Some things you kept to yourself. Some things were between you and the mountain. The week crawled past like a wounded animal. Physical training before dawn, classroom instruction on cold weather survival, avalanche recognition, high-altitude physiology, weapons maintenance, land navigation. Every day the same grind, and every day Nora felt Ashford's eyes on her, waiting for her to stumble. She didn't stumble, but she didn't excel either. She was average, middle of the pack, exactly what she'd been taught to be. Her father had taught her that. Walter Blackwell, who'd grown up in the same mountains she had, who'd learned to hunt before he could read, who joined the Army Rangers and survived Grenada, only to die 6 months later in a training accident that the Army called routine and her mother called murder by negligence. Nora had been 7 years old. She remembered her father in flashes, his calloused hands teaching her to tie knots, his quiet voice explaining how to read a trail, his patient instruction on the art of being invisible. "The mountain doesn't care about you, Nora girl," he'd say. "Doesn't care if you're strong or weak, fast or slow. Mountain only cares if you're smart. Smart beats strong every time." She'd carried that lesson for 18 years, through her mother's slow decline from grief and black lung disease, through her own enlistment in the Marines at 21, through intelligence school, where she'd excelled at analysis and failed at politics. And now, through this impossible trial, where being smart meant staying quiet, staying average, staying alive long enough to find an opening. The opening came at 0200 on a Wednesday morning, when the temperature was 12 degrees below zero and the base was locked down for the night. Nora slipped out of the barracks in black thermal gear, moving through shadows like her father had taught her. The North Ridge was a 40-minute climb in the dark. She made it in 35. Master Sergeant Hartwick was waiting. He stood on a flat outcrop of rock, barely visible against the star-bright sky. When Nora approached, he didn't turn around, just kept staring out at the mountains. "Your daddy taught me to move quiet," Hartwick said, "but you're quieter than he was." "How?" Nora came to stand beside him. "Smaller, less weight to distribute." "Smart answer." Hartwick finally looked at her. "How much do you weigh in full kit?" 180, Master Sergeant. "Donovan weighs 240 in full kit, got 8 inches and 90 pounds on you. In a straight fight, he wins. Every time. You understand that?" "Yes, Master Sergeant." "Good, because I'm not here to teach you how to fight fair. Fair fights are for people who want to die with honor. I'm here to teach you how to win." He moved to the center of the outcrop and gestured for her to follow. The rock was covered in a thin layer of snow, treacherous footing in the dark. "Your daddy and I served together in Grenada," Hartwick said. "October '83. I was Force Recon, he was Ranger Regiment. We got tasked with a joint operation, extract some embassy personnel who'd gotten cut off when the invasion started. Simple mission, in and out." He paused, and in the silence, Nora could hear the wind moving through the pines below them. "We hit resistance. Grenadian soldiers, Cuban advisors, didn't matter who they were. We were outnumbered 3-1, taking fire from buildings we couldn't identify in the dark. Lost 2 men in the first 30 seconds. The lieutenant called for us to fall back, regroup, wait for air support." "But my father didn't fall back," Nora said quietly. "No, your daddy did the craziest thing I've ever seen a Ranger do, and I've seen some crazy shit. He dropped his rifle, pulled out his K-bar knife, and went through a window into the building the fire was coming from. Just disappeared. We thought he was dead. Then 30 seconds later, the shooting stopped." Hartwick's eyes were distant, seeing something 3,000 miles and 10 years away. He came out with 2 Cuban soldiers' sidearms and an intelligence map showing their defensive positions. Didn't fire a shot. Used that knife in his brain and killed 3 men before they knew he was there. Saved the entire operation. "How?" Nora asked. "Pressure points, leverage, speed." Hartwick moved closer to her. "See, most people think combat is about strength. It's not. It's about physics. About understanding that the human body is a machine with specific weaknesses. You hit the right spot with the right amount of force at the right angle. Doesn't matter how big the target is. They go down." He held out his hand. "Come at me, full speed." Nora hesitated. "Master Sergeant." "That's an order, Corporal." She moved, fast, driving her shoulder into Hartwick's center mass like she'd been taught in basic training. He didn't budge, just redirected her momentum with a subtle shift of his hips, and suddenly Nora was on the ground, the breath knocked out of her lungs, staring up at the stars. Hartwick offered her a hand. "You fight like they taught you in boot camp. That's good against other boots. Against a combat veteran, you're dead. Now get up and try again." For the next 2 hours, in the freezing dark at 8,000 feet, Master Sergeant Silas Hartwick taught Nora Blackwell how to kill with precision. He showed her the soft spot below the solar plexus, where a strike would paralyze the diaphragm. The cluster of nerves on the side of the neck that, when pressed correctly, would drop a man unconscious in 3 seconds. The angle to strike the knee to hyperextend it. The way to use an opponent's momentum against them, turning their strength into weakness. "This isn't about fighting one person," Hartwick explained as Nora practiced a throat strike on him for the 20th time. "It's about fighting 6. You're going to be outnumbered in every engagement, every single one. So you need to think like an Appalachian woman fighting off a pack of coyotes." "How's that, Master Sergeant?" You don't fight the pack, you fight the alpha. Break him fast, break him hard, and the rest hesitate. In that hesitation, you break them too. One at a time, faster than they can process what's happening. He demonstrated, moving with a fluidity that belied his age. The key is the first strike. Has to be devastating, has to make them doubt. Once doubt enters the equation, you've already won. By the time they finished, Nora's muscles were screaming and her hands were numb with cold. But something had changed. She moved differently now, thought differently. The mountain had taught her patience. Her father had taught her observation. Now Hartwick had taught her precision. Same time tomorrow, Hartwick said as they prepared to descend. And Corporal, what we're doing here stays between us. Ashford finds out I'm training you privately. He'll court-martial me and dismiss you. Understood? Yes, Master Sergeant. One more thing. Hartwick's face was serious in the starlight. Donovan's winter warfare exercise is in 6 days. He's going to try to break you. Not physically, psychologically. He wants you to make a mistake so catastrophic that Ashford has an excuse to shut this whole program down. What kind of mistake? The kind that gets Marines killed, even in a training scenario. Hartwick met her eyes. Your daddy survived Grenada because he thought 3 steps ahead of everyone else. You need to do the same. Think about what Donovan wants, what Ashford wants, what the Corps wants. Then give them something they didn't know they needed. He started down the mountain, then paused. Your daddy would be proud of you, Nora. I hope you know that. Then he was gone, and Nora was alone with the wind and the stars and the weight of expectations she hadn't asked for, but was determined to meet. The winter warfare exercise began at 0600 on a Saturday morning. The temperature was 9 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind was gusting to 40 miles per hour. Perfect conditions for Marines to die if they made mistakes. The scenario was simple. 2 fire teams would maneuver through 10 miles of mountain terrain to secure an objective, a mock-up of a Taliban compound built in a high valley. The defending force, led by Sergeant Donovan, would attempt to stop them. Live ammunition would not be used, but everything else was real. The cold, the altitude, the consequences. Lieutenant Colonel Ashford stood in the operations center, studying the map with the intensity of a man looking for problems. He found one immediately. Blackwell's team is under strength, he said to the training officer. She's only got 3 Marines. Donovan has 6. Corporal Blackwell requested the smaller team, sir, the officer replied. Said it was more realistic for her skill set. Ashford's eyes narrowed. Her skill set? And what skill set is that? She didn't say, sir. On the map, Nora's team was marked with blue symbols. Her, Private Mercer, and Private Luis Garcia, the only other Marine who'd been willing to volunteer for her team. Garcia was a quiet kid from Texas, 19 years old, who joined the Corps to escape a bad home situation and didn't care about politics or gender. He just wanted to be a good Marine. Donovan's team was marked in red, 6 combat veterans, moving in a tight formation through the valley approach. Blackwell's taking the ridge route, the training officer observed. That's the hard way, sir. Slower terrain, more exposure to weather. It's also the stupid way, Ashford said. The valley route is faster. Donovan will reach the objective first, establish defensive positions, and wait for her team to stumble into the kill zone. He shook his head. This is going to be over in 3 hours, maybe less. But it wasn't. Hour 1. Donovan's team made excellent progress through the valley, covering 3 miles in under an hour. Nora's team, struggling through waist-deep snow on the ridge, covered less than 1 mile. Hour 2. Donovan reached the objective and set up interlocking fields of fire. His team was confident, joking over the radio about how this was going to be the easiest training evolution they'd ever run. Hour 3. The weather changed. Weather in the Sierra Nevada doesn't shift, it attacks. One moment the sky was clear, the next clouds rolled in like gray cavalry, and the wind went from 40 miles per hour to 70. Visibility dropped to 20 feet. The temperature plummeted. In the operations center, Ashford leaned forward. "Get both teams on the radio. I want position reports." Donovan's team responded immediately. "Red team in position at objective. Weather deteriorating. Request permission to move to shelter." "Permission denied," Ashford said. "This is training. You hold position." "Copy that, sir." The radio crackled. "Blue team, report position." Silence. "Blue team, this is operations. Report your position." More silence. Ashford's jaw tightened. "Find them. Now." For the next 20 minutes, the operations center tried to raise Nora's team. Nothing. Just static and the howl of wind across the mountains. Then Donovan's voice came through, tight with tension. "Operations Red Team, we have movement on our north flank. Can't get visual through the weather. Requesting permission to investigate." "Permission granted. Be advised, Blue Team is not responding to radio calls." "Roger that. Moving to investigate." What happened next would be debated in after-action reports for months. Donovan and his team moved north through the whiteout, weapons ready, expecting to find Nora's team stumbling through the storm. Instead, they found Private Garcia. He was alone, sitting against a tree, looking dazed. "Garcia!" Donovan knelt beside him. "Where's the rest of your team?" Garcia pointed vaguely west. They went that way. I couldn't keep up. Lost them in the storm." Donovan cursed. "Operations, Red Team. We found one member of Blue Team, Private Garcia. He's separated from his team and appears to be suffering from early-stage hypothermia. Requesting medical evacuation." "Copy, Red Team. Medevac inbound, ETA 20 minutes. Continue search for remaining Blue Team members." Donovan split his team. 3 Marines stayed with Garcia. He took 2 Marines and pushed west, following the tracks in the snow. That's when it happened. Out of the whiteout, moving like ghosts, Nora and Declan appeared on Donovan's flanks. Not in front of him, not behind him. On his flanks, where his field of fire couldn't reach them without hitting his own team. Nora's voice cut through the storm, calm and cold. "Sergeant Donovan, you're surrounded. Cease fire and surrender your position." Donovan spun, bringing his training rifle up. "Blackwell? How the hell?" "Check your 6, Sergeant." Donovan turned. Behind him, Private Garcia was on his feet, no longer looking dazed. He had his training rifle pointed at the 3 Marines who'd stayed to guard him. It had all been theater. The separation, the hypothermia, all of it designed to split Donovan's team and create an opening. In the operations center, Ashford stared at the unfolding scenario with something approaching disbelief. "She baited them," the training officer said quietly. "Use Garcia as bait, let Donovan split his force, then attacked from multiple angles." "That's not," Ashford stopped himself. "That's not how this was supposed to go." On the mountain, Donovan lowered his rifle. For a long moment, he just looked at Nora through the driving snow. Then slowly, he smiled. "Well played, Corporal. Well played." Nora didn't smile back. "Sir, we need to get everyone off this mountain. This weather's only going to get worse." She was right. Within 30 minutes, the storm had escalated to the point where the medevac helicopter couldn't fly. All 9 Marines had to shelter in place for 6 hours while the storm passed, huddled in hasty snow caves, burning through their emergency rations, and sharing body heat to stay alive. It was Nora who organized the shelter. Nora who rationed the supplies. Nora who kept everyone calm when the wind was howling so loud they couldn't hear each other shout. By the time the storm cleared and they could descend, something had changed. Donovan's Marines didn't look at her with contempt anymore. They looked at her with something else. Something that might have been respect. The after-action review happened 3 days later. All 9 Marines stood in a classroom while Ashford and Hartwick reviewed the exercise. "Corporal Blackwell," Ashford's voice was carefully neutral. "Explain your tactical decision to use Private Garcia as bait." "Sir, Sergeant Donovan's team had superior numbers in defensive position. A direct assault would have failed. I needed to create an advantage, so I created doubt. When Sergeant Donovan found Private Garcia alone, he had to make a choice: continue to the objective or help a fellow Marine. He made the right choice. That choice also gave us the opening we needed. And if Private Garcia had actually been suffering from hypothermia, if the scenario had been real, then Sergeant Donovan would have saved his life, sir. Either way, Marines take care of Marines. Ashford studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Donovan. Sergeant, your assessment? Donovan stood. Sir, Corporal Blackwell executed a tactically sound ambush using limited resources and superior terrain knowledge. Her team's performance exceeded my expectations. That's not what I asked, Sergeant. I asked for your assessment of Corporal Blackwell. Donovan glanced at Nora. Something unreadable passed across his face. Sir, I was wrong about her. She's not a liability. She's a Marine. The room went silent. Ashford closed the folder in front of him. Dismissed, except for Corporal Blackwell. You stay. The room emptied. Nora stood at attention while Ashford walked to the window, looking out at the mountains. You embarrassed Sergeant Donovan, Ashford said finally. You made him look foolish in front of his team. That wasn't my intention, sir. No, your intention was to win, and you did. Ashford turned to face her. Let me tell you something about the Marine Corps, Corporal. We don't like change. We especially don't like change that's forced on us by politicians who've never worn the uniform. This program you're part of? I didn't ask for it, don't want it, but I've got my orders, same as you. He moved closer, and there was something in his eyes that might have been regret. I've been waiting for you to fail, Blackwell, waiting for you to prove that women don't belong in combat roles. But you haven't failed. You've succeeded, and that presents me with a problem. Sir, the problem is that success changes nothing. Even if you graduate this course, even if you qualify for every school the Corps can throw at you, the policy hasn't changed. Women are still banned from direct ground combat. You'll go back to intelligence and spend the rest of your career analyzing battles you'll never fight. All you've proven is that the system is broken, not that it needs fixing. Nora's hands clenched at her sides. With respect, sir, I didn't join the Corps to change the system. I joined to serve. And you have served, but service isn't enough anymore, is it? Ashford walked back to his desk. I'm recommending you for immediate reassignment, back to intelligence where you can have a successful career without threatening the status quo. The words hit like a physical blow. Sir, this isn't punishment, Corporal. It's reality. The Pentagon is shutting down this program. My hands are tied. He picked up a piece of paper. Unless, sir? Ashford looked at her, and for the first time she saw doubt in his eyes. Real doubt. Master Sergeant Hartwick has made an unusual request. He wants to run one final evaluation, a demonstration in front of the entire training cadre. He says if you pass, he'll resign early and recommend you for permanent assignment to this unit as an instructor. If you fail, you accept reassignment without protest. What kind of demonstration, sir? Hand-to-hand combat. You against 6 opponents of your choosing. Full contact, no weapons. First to submit or incapacitate wins. Ashford's smile was thin. Master Sergeant Hartwick seems to think you can prove something the rest of us have missed. I'm giving you the chance to try. What do you say, Corporal? Nora thought about her father, about Grenada and pressure points and fighting smarter, not harder. About every night on the North Ridge, learning to turn physics into victory. I say yes, sir. Good. You have 72 hours to prepare. Dismissed. Nora saluted and left. Outside, Master Sergeant Hartwick was waiting in the hallway. He didn't say anything, just nodded once and walked away. Nora understood. In 72 hours, everything would change. One way or another, the ghost of Bridgeport was about to become visible, and the Corps would never be the same. The next 72 hours existed outside of time. Nora didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw 6 Marines coming at her like a tidal wave, and no amount of training or precision could stop that much mass, that much violence, that much doubt disguised as certainty. She ran the North Ridge at midnight, again at 0300, again at dawn. Master Sergeant Hartwick met her each time, wordless, impatient, watching as she practiced the movements he'd taught her. Strike, redirect, pivot, strike again. The human body as a weapon, physics as salvation. On the second night, Private Declan Mercer found them. Nora was midway through a sequence, demonstrating how to use an opponent's forward momentum to break their balance, when she caught movement in her peripheral vision. Declan stood at the edge of the outcrop, his breath forming white clouds in the sub-zero air. Hartwick didn't stop the drill. "Private Mercer, you're out of your rack without authorization." "Yes, Master Sergeant." Declan didn't move. "I followed Corporal Blackwell." "Why?" "Because I want to help, Master Sergeant." Hartwick glanced at Nora, then back at Declan. "You understand what happens if anyone finds out about this? Court-martial for me, dismissal for the corporal, probably for you too." "Yes, Master Sergeant." "And you're still here?" Declan stepped forward into the starlight. He looked young, impossibly young, but there was steel in his voice. "Master Sergeant, I joined the Marine Corps because my grandfather was a Marine. Iwo Jima, 1945. He told me stories about what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself, about honor and sacrifice and doing the right thing, even when it's hard." He looked at Nora. "Watching Corporal Blackwell these past weeks, that's what my grandfather was talking about. She's not here because it's easy. She's here because it matters. And if I can help her prove that, even a little bit, then court-martial me. I'll wear it like a badge." Silence filled the mountain. Somewhere far below, a coyote called to the night. Hartwick's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "You ever study physics, Private?" "No, Master Sergeant." "You're about to." Hartwick gestured to the center of the outcrop. "Get over here. You're going to learn how to be a training dummy for the next 48 hours. And Private, this is going to hurt." It did hurt, for both of them. Hartwick ran them through scenarios until Nora's knuckles bled, and Declan's ribs were bruised purple. 6-on-1 from every angle. Fast attacks, slow attacks, coordinated attacks, chaotic attacks. Again and again, Hartwick would call out positions. 2 from the left, 1 from behind, 3 holding center. And Nora would have to react, process, execute. The key, Hartwick explained, was psychological disruption. 6 men attacking as a unit is dangerous, he said, watching Nora practice a throat strike on Declan for the 100th time. But 6 men are also 6 egos, 6 separate decision-making processes, 6 different reaction times. Your job isn't to fight all 6 simultaneously. Your job is to break their cohesion so fast they don't realize they've stopped being a team. How, Master Sergeant? The Alpha, always the Alpha. Hartwick pointed to an imaginary lineup. Doesn't matter if he's actually in charge. What matters is who the others are watching, who they're taking cues from. You identify him in the first 2 seconds, you hit him so hard and so precisely that the others freeze in disbelief. In that freeze, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3, you're already moving to the next target. Declan rubbed his ribs. What if they don't freeze? Then the corporal's going to lose, and we're all going to regret this conversation. Hartwick's voice was matter-of-fact. But I don't think they will. See, combat isn't about what actually happens. It's about what people expect to happen. Those 6 Marines expect Corporal Blackwell to lose. They expect her to be overwhelmed, to tap out, to prove everything they already believe about women in combat. That expectation is a weakness, and weakness is opportunity. On the final night before the demonstration, Hartwick called a halt to training. They stood together on the North Ridge, looking out at the dark shapes of the mountains against the stars. Your daddy told me something in Grenada, Hartwick said quietly. We were pinned down, taking fire, scared out of our minds. And he turned to me and said, Flint, that's what they called me back then. Flint, fear is just your body getting ready to do something impossible. So let's do something impossible. He looked at Nora. Tomorrow, you're going to be scared. Use it. Let that fear sharpen you, focus you, make you faster than you've ever been. And remember, this isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Nora nodded. Her throat was too tight for words. Get some sleep, Corporal. You're going to need it. She tried. Lay in her rack for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the other Marines breathe in the darkness. At 0400, she gave up and went to the gym. Ran through kata exercises her father had taught her. Slow, precise movements designed to center the mind and calm the body. At 0600, the base loudspeaker crackled to life. All personnel, report to the training pit at 0800 for mandatory demonstration. All personnel, that is all. The next 2 hours were a blur of breakfast she couldn't taste and equipment checks she performed on autopilot. At 0745, Nora stood outside the training pit, listening to the voices of 240 Marines gathering inside. Master Sergeant Hartwick appeared beside her. Ready? No, Master Sergeant. Good. Only fools are ready for something like this. He handed her a pair of thin gloves. Wear these. Your hands are already damaged from training. No sense making it worse. The others won't be wearing gloves, Master Sergeant. The others aren't fighting 6-on-1. Hartwick's expression softened, just slightly. Nora, listen to me. Win or lose, you've already proven something important. You've proven you belong here. Don't forget that. Yes, Master Sergeant. Now go show them why. The training pit was an outdoor arena carved into the mountainside, a 50-foot circle of packed earth, surrounded by tiered seating. When Nora descended the steps, she felt the weight of 240 pairs of eyes follow her movement. Lieutenant Colonel Ashford stood at the center of the pit with 6 Marines. Sergeant Rick Donovan and his crew, the biggest, most experienced combat veterans in the unit. They weren't wearing gloves. Ashford's voice carried across the pit without amplification. The rules are simple. Hand-to-hand combat, no weapons. First to submit or be rendered unable to continue loses. This is full contact training. Injuries are expected. Medical personnel are standing by. He looked at Nora. Corporal Blackwell, do you understand and accept these terms? Yes, sir. Sergeant Donovan, do you and your team understand and accept these terms? Donovan grinned. It wasn't cruel, just confident. Yes, sir. Then take your positions. Nora moved to one side of the circle. The 6 Marines spread out in a loose semicircle, 20 feet away. Donovan stood at the center, his hands relaxed at his sides. To his left and right, the others shifted their weight, ready to move. In the stands, Nora caught sight of Declan. He was sitting ramrod straight, his face pale but determined. Near him, scattered through the crowd, she saw other faces. Some hostile, some curious, some, a small minority, hopeful. Ashford raised his hand. On my mark, 3, 2, 1, execute. For exactly 2 seconds, nobody moved. Nora used those seconds to map the terrain. Donovan in center, the natural leader, the alpha. To his left, Corporal James Hayes, 6'3", former college linebacker, slow but powerful. To his right, Lance Corporal Mike Torres, smaller and faster, probably tasked with flanking. Behind them, 3 more Marines in a loose second rank. Privates First Class Wilson, Kowalski, and Chen. Support players, waiting to capitalize on openings. Then Donovan made a gesture, barely perceptible, just a slight tilt of his head, and all 6 moved at once. They came in a coordinated rush, trying to overwhelm her with numbers and speed. Donovan straight ahead, Hayes and Torres from the angles, the back 3 closing to prevent escape. Textbook-packed tactics. Nora had 3 seconds before they'd be on her. She moved. Not backward, which is what they expected. Forward and to the right, directly at Torres. He was fast, but he was also committed to his angle of attack, his momentum carrying him in a direction he couldn't change. Nora dropped low, faster than his eyes could track, and drove her shoulder into his leading knee. Physics is unforgiving. Knee joints are designed to bend one way. When forced to bend another way with sufficient force, they hyperextend. Torres went down with a scream that cut across the pit like a knife. 1 second elapsed. Nora was already moving, using Torres's falling body as cover from the others. Hayes had committed too far forward, his bulk working against him. She pivoted, slipped inside his guard, and drove the heel of her palm into his solar plexus. Not hard enough to cause permanent damage, but hard enough to paralyze his diaphragm. Hayes gasped, his eyes going wide, and dropped to his knees. 2 seconds elapsed. Donovan was there, faster than she'd anticipated. His fist came at her face like a sledgehammer. Nora couldn't block it. He was too strong, too fast. So she didn't try. She turned with the punch, letting it graze her cheek instead of connecting full force, and used his extended arm as a fulcrum. One hand on his wrist, the other on his elbow, and she rotated her entire body, leveraging his momentum into a textbook armbar. Donovan grunted in pain but didn't go down. He was too experienced, too strong. He started to counter, to use his weight to break her grip. That's when Nora drove her knee into the cluster of nerves on the side of his neck. Master Sergeant Hartwick had taught her this strike. 3 pounds of pressure, precisely applied to the vagus nerve. Donovan's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. 4 seconds elapsed. The 3 remaining Marines, Wilson, Kowalski, and Chen, froze. Just for an instant. Just long enough for their brains to process what they just witnessed. Their sergeant, their leader, their alpha, was on the ground unconscious. Hayes was gasping for air. Torres was clutching his knee. In that instant of hesitation, Nora moved. She went for Chen first because he was closest, driving a straight punch into his throat. Not hard enough to crush his windpipe, but hard enough to make him think she had. He stumbled backward, hands going to his neck, eyes wide with panic. Wilson and Kowalski came at her together, trying to use their numbers advantage. They were smart, coordinating their attacks, one high and one low. But they were also predictable. Nora dropped to the ground, swept Kowalski's legs out from under him with her own, and used the momentum to roll into Wilson's knees. He toppled forward, and Nora was already rising, her elbow catching him perfectly on the temple as he fell. Wilson hit the ground and didn't get up. Kowalski was scrambling to his feet when Nora's foot caught him in the ribs. Not a killing blow, just enough to knock the wind out of him, to make him reconsider his life choices. He stayed down. 7 seconds had elapsed since Ashford had said, "Execute." Nora stood in the center of the pit, breathing hard, her hands still raised in a fighting stance. Around her, 6 Marines lay in various states of consciousness and pain. Torres clutching his knee, Hayes gasping for breath, Donovan unconscious, Chen still holding his throat, Wilson out cold, Kowalski curled on his side. The training pit was absolutely silent. Then someone in the stand started clapping, slowly at first. Then Donovan was coming around, his eyes unfocused but aware. Chen, Wilson, and Kowalski would all have bruises, but nothing permanent. Ashford descended into the pit. He walked past the injured Marines, past the corpsman, and stopped directly in front of Nora. "Corporal Blackwell," his voice was flat, emotionless. "Explain what just happened." "Sir, I engaged 6 opponents using precision strikes to vulnerable points, exploiting their coordination to create openings, and I know what you did, Corporal. I watched you do it." Ashford's eyes were hard. "What I'm asking is how a 128-pound woman just incapacitated 6 combat-trained Marines in under 10 seconds. Nora met his gaze. "Physics, sir, leverage, timing, and the advantage of being underestimated." Something flickered across Ashford's face. Not quite approval, not quite respect. Something harder to define. You made Sergeant Donovan look like a fool, Ashford said quietly, so only she could hear. You made me look like a fool for doubting you. You made the entire concept of combat exclusion look like a fool's policy. He paused. I don't know whether to court-martial you or promote you. Sir? Dismissed, Corporal. We'll talk later. Nora saluted and turned to leave. It was just a training exercise. Just a training exercise, Declan repeated, shaking his head. Ma'am, with all due respect, you just rewrote the manual. But the euphoria didn't last. That night, Nora was summoned to Ashford's office. She went expecting commendation, maybe even the promise of permanent assignment that Hartwick had mentioned. Instead, she found Ashford sitting behind his desk with a folder open in front of him. His face was carved from stone. Sit down, Corporal. Nora sat. Ashford slid a piece of paper across the desk. This came down from Pentagon this afternoon. The program is terminated, effective immediately. You're being reassigned to intelligence school at Dam Neck, Virginia. You ship out in 72 hours. The words hit like a physical blow. Sir, I don't understand. I passed the evaluation. Master Sergeant Hartwick doesn't make policy. Neither do I. Ashford's voice was tired. The conservative groups are calling it fake, staged propaganda. The Commandant is getting phone calls from senators who want to know why we're running unauthorized training programs. He turned back to face her. You succeeded, Blackwell. You proved women can fight, and because you proved it, the entire program has to be buried before it becomes a political wildfire. Nora's hands clenched in her lap. So, success equals failure. Welcome to politics. Ashford returned to his desk. You're a good Marine, Corporal. You'll have a fine career in intelligence. You'll retire with honor, benefits, everything you've earned. But you won't ever set foot in a combat training unit again. That door is closed. Sir, with respect. There is no respect in this situation, Corporal. There's only orders. You're dismissed. Nora stood, saluted mechanically, and left. She walked through the base in a daze, not seeing the buildings or the people or the mountains, just walking. Hartwick moved to stand beside her. Maybe not today, maybe not for years, but it matters. How can you say that? They're burying this program, pretending it never happened. They're trying to bury it, but you can't bury truth, Nora. Not forever. Hartwick's voice was gentle. Your daddy used to say that change doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments. Small moments that most people don't even notice. Today you gave the Marine Corps a moment. 240 Marines watched you do the impossible. They're going to remember that. They're going to talk about it. They're going to question things they never questioned before. And then what? Then maybe, someday, the rules change. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but they'll change. Because you planted a seed today, Nora, and seeds grow. Nora turned to look at him. What am I supposed to do now? You go to Dam Neck. You become the best intelligence officer the Corps has ever seen. You train the next generation, even if they're all men. You wait. Hartwick's eyes were steady. And when the call comes, when the policy changes and they finally open combat roles to women, you make sure there are Marines ready to fill those roles. Marines you trained. Marines who learned from the ghost of Bridgeport. What if the call never comes? Then you still spent your life being excellent. That's not a bad legacy. They stood in silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the snow in shades of orange and gold. I'm sorry, Nora, Hartwick said finally. You deserved better than this. We all deserve better, Master Sergeant. We just don't always get it. The final briefing happened 48 hours later. Nora stood in a classroom with the 6 Marines she'd fought in the pit. They were all there by choice. Ashford had made attendance optional. Sergeant Donovan spoke first. His jaw was still bruised where Nora's strike had connected. Corporal Blackwell, I owe you an apology. I treated you like you were less than a Marine. I was wrong." The others nodded, murmured agreement. Nora shook her head. "You don't owe me anything, Sergeant. You fought the way you were trained to fight. You believe what the Corps taught you to believe. That's not your fault." "Maybe not," Donovan extended his hand, "but I'm still sorry. For what it's worth, I'm going to remember what you did. When I train new Marines, I'm going to tell them about precision, about using your brain instead of just your body, about how the smallest person in the room can still be the most dangerous." They shook hands. Before Nora could respond, the door opened and Lieutenant Colonel Ashford entered. Everyone came to attention. "As you were," Ashford looked at Nora. "Corporal, a word outside." In the hallway, Ashford handed her a sealed envelope. "This is your official reassignment orders. You report to Dam Neck on December 1st. He paused. "There's something else, unofficial, off the record. Sir, I made some calls, pulled some strings. You're being assigned to the intelligence school as an instructor. Combat analysis, tactical planning, that sort of thing. It's not combat, but it's close." Nora took the envelope. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. Thank Master Sergeant Hartwick. He cashed in every favor he had to make this happen." Ashford's expression softened, just slightly. "Blackwell, I was wrong about you, about this whole program. I let my prejudices blind me to what was possible. That's on me." "Sir, let me finish." Ashford looked out the window at the mountains. "My daughter is 15 years old, smart as hell, athletic, wants to join the Marines when she turns 18. For years I've been telling her she can serve, but only in certain roles. Support roles. Safe roles." He turned back to Nora. "After watching you fight, I called her. Told her I was wrong. Told her that if she wants to be infantry, armor, artillery, whatever, she should fight for it. Because someday the rules are going to change. And when they do, Marines like you will have made it possible." He offered his hand. "You're a credit to the Corps, Corporal. Don't ever forget that." They shook hands and Nora saluted one final time. That night the temperature dropped to 15 below zero. Nora packed her gear in silence, folding her uniforms with precision, securing her equipment with care. Tomorrow she'd leave Bridgeport forever. Leave the mountains, leave the dream of combat service. But she wouldn't leave empty-handed. At 0200 there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Declan standing in the hallway, holding something wrapped in cloth. "Private Mercer, you're out of your rack." "Yes, ma'am, I know." He held out the bundle. "Master Sergeant Hartwick wanted you to have this. He said it belonged to your father." Nora unwrapped the cloth carefully. Inside was a K-bar knife, the blade worn smooth with use, the handle wrapped in faded paracord. On the blade, etched in careful letters, were two words: Walter Blackwell. Her breath caught. "Master Sergeant Hartwick carried it through Grenada," Declan said quietly. "Your father gave it to him the night before the assault, told him to keep it safe. Hartwick's been carrying it ever since, waiting for the right time to return it to your family." Nora's hands trembled as she held the knife. Her father's knife. The one he'd carried into combat. The one that had saved Hartwick's life. "Where is he?" she asked. "Where's Master Sergeant Hartwick?" "North Ridge, ma'am. Said you'd know where." Nora grabbed her jacket and ran. The climb to the North Ridge took 20 minutes. When she arrived, breathless and cold, Hartwick was standing at the outcrop, silhouetted against the stars. "Master Sergeant, your daddy gave me that knife because he knew he might not come back," Hartwick said without turning around. "Told me if anything happened to him, I should find his daughter someday and teach her what he'd taught me. Took me 10 years to find you, Nora, and another 15 to get the chance to keep that promise. You knew. This whole time, you knew who I was. From the moment I saw your name on the training roster," Hartwick finally turned to face her. "I requested this assignment specifically. Told my command I wanted one last training rotation before I retired. They thought I was being sentimental." He smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him. They were right, just not the way they thought. Nora looked down at the knife in her hands. Why didn't you tell me? Because you needed to earn it. Needed to prove to yourself that you belonged here. Not because of your father's legacy, but because of your own skill, your own courage. Hartwick stepped closer. You've done that, Nora. Walter would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. But it's over. They're shutting it down. No, it's just beginning. Hartwick pointed to the mountains, dark shapes against the starlit sky. Every Marine who watched you fight today learned something. Every instructor, every private, every officer. They learned that their assumptions were wrong. That's how change starts. Not with policy, with minds. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You're going to Dam Neck. You're going to be an instructor. And you're going to train a generation of Marines to think differently. To see combat as a problem that requires intelligence and precision, not just strength. Some of them will be men. Some of them eventually will be women. And when those women finally get their chance, when the rules finally change, they're going to be ready. Because you made them ready. Nora's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. I wanted to fight, Master Sergeant. I wanted to prove I could stand with any Marine in combat. You did prove it. You just proved it 20 years too early. Hartwick's voice was gentle. That's not failure, Nora. That's prophecy. You showed them the future. Now you have to help build it. They stood together in the cold and the dark, teacher and student, old warrior and new, bound by a promise made in blood and kept through time. Thank you, Master Sergeant, Nora whispered, for everything. Thank your daddy. I just kept my word. Hartwick stepped back and saluted. Not the perfunctory salute of routine, but a slow, precise, heartfelt gesture of respect. Semper Fi, Corporal Blackwell. Nora returned the salute, her hands sharp against the night sky. Semper Fi, Master Sergeant. Then she turned and descended the mountain, carrying her father's knife in a future that hadn't been written yet. Behind her, Silas Hartwick watched until she disappeared into the darkness. Then he looked up at the stars and spoke to a ghost. I kept my promise, Walter. Your girl's going to change the world, just like you knew she would. The wind carried his words into the mountains, where they became part of the stone and snow and the endless patience of the earth. The intelligence school at Dam Neck, Virginia, occupied a strip of windswept coastline where the Atlantic met the land in a constant negotiation of erosion and resistance. Nora arrived on a gray December morning in 1993, her sea bag heavy with uniforms and heavier with the weight of dreams deferred. The base looked nothing like Bridgeport. No mountains, no snow, just flat training grounds and squat concrete buildings that seemed designed to crush ambition rather than cultivate it. But Lieutenant Colonel Ashford had kept his word. Nora wasn't just another student, she was an instructor. The youngest instructor in the history of the school, and the only woman. Her first class began on a Monday morning in January 1994. 32 Marines filed into the classroom, all men, all veterans of the Gulf War or Somalia or Panama. They took their seats with the casual confidence of people who'd already proven themselves in combat. When Nora walked to the front of the room, the conversation didn't stop. It just changed frequency, became whispers and sidelong glances. She wrote her name on the board in sharp, precise letters. Corporal Blackwell. Gentlemen, she said, her voice carrying to the back of the room without strain. This is Combat Analysis 327. Over the next 8 weeks, you're going to learn how to read a battlefield the way a surgeon reads an X-ray. How to identify weaknesses in enemy positions. How to exploit terrain, weather, psychology. How to win fights before the first shot is fired. A hand went up in the back. Staff Sergeant Michael Reeves, according to her roster. Gulf War veteran, 3 years her senior in age and rank. Yes, Staff Sergeant? Ma'am, with all due respect, what combat experience do you have to teach this course? The room went quiet. Nora had been expecting this question, had prepared for it during the long drive from California to Virginia. None, Staff Sergeant. I've never been in combat. I've never fired a shot in anger. I've never called in artillery or evacuated casualties under fire. She paused, letting the admission settle. But I've studied every major engagement from the Gulf War. I've analyzed the failures at Mogadishu. I've read after-action reports from Panama, Grenada, Lebanon. I've spent 3 years learning how Marines fight and die, and my job is to help you do more of the former and less of the latter. Reeves didn't back down. Respectfully, ma'am, book learning isn't the same as real experience. You're absolutely right, Staff Sergeant, which is why you're going to teach me, Nora gestured to the class. Every one of you has seen combat. You've made decisions under fire. You've survived situations that should have killed you. This class isn't about me lecturing you. It's about extracting your knowledge, analyzing it, and turning experience into doctrine that will save the next generation of Marines. She pulled out a map of Mogadishu and spread it across her desk. Staff Sergeant Reeves, you were at the Bakara Market, October 3rd. Tell me what went wrong. Reeves blinked, surprised. Ma'am, that's classified. It was declassified 3 weeks ago. I have the full after-action report, but I want to hear it from someone who was there. Nora met his eyes. Help me understand, not what the report says, what you experienced. For a long moment, Reeves just stared at her. Then slowly he stood and walked to the map. His finger traced streets that Nora had memorized but never walked. We came in fast, he said quietly. Helicopters, vehicles, overwhelming force. The plan was simple. Get in, grab the targets, get out. 30 minutes, tops. His finger stopped on an intersection. But simple doesn't survive contact with the enemy. They were waiting for us, not with heavy weapons, with patience. They let us get deep into the market, then collapse the streets behind us. Suddenly, we weren't the hunters. We were trapped. The classroom was absolutely silent now. Other Marines were leaning forward, remembering their own battles, their own trapped moments. The thing nobody tells you about urban combat, Reeves continued, is that every window is a potential threat. Every doorway, every pile of rubble. You can't see the enemy until they're shooting at you, and by then it's too late. We had all the technology, all the training, all the firepower, but they had the terrain. And in the end, terrain wins. Nora listened, taking notes, asking questions that drew out details Reeves didn't know he remembered. By the end of the hour, the entire class was engaged, analyzing the battle not as a failure, but as a learning opportunity, as a puzzle that could be solved if approached with the right mindset. When the class ended, Reeves approached her desk. Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I assumed you couldn't teach us anything because you haven't been in combat. I was wrong. No apology necessary, Staff Sergeant. You asked a legitimate question. I would have done the same. Nora closed her notebook. But here's the thing about combat experience. It's valuable, but it's also limiting. You experience Mogadishu from one perspective, one position, one moment in time. My job is to show you the entire battle, every decision, every consequence, every alternative that wasn't taken. Together, we turn your experience into knowledge that transcends any single engagement. Reeves nodded slowly. I think I'm going to like this class, ma'am. I think you're going to hate it, Staff Sergeant, because I'm going to make you think harder than you've ever thought before. But you'll be a better Marine for it. Over the next 8 weeks, Nora discovered something unexpected. She was good at this. Not just competent, exceptional. She had a gift for breaking down complex tactical situations into comprehensible pieces, for seeing patterns that others missed, for asking questions that made experienced Marines rethink everything they thought they knew about combat. And slowly, quietly, her reputation began to grow. By the end of 1994, Nora had taught 6 classes, had analyzed dozens of engagements, had started writing tactical papers that were circulated among the intelligence community. Her name appeared in footnotes of official doctrine, in the acknowledgments of senior officers' reports, in the quiet conversations of Marines who'd been taught to think differently about warfare. The ghost of Bridgeport was becoming something else, something more dangerous to the old order than any physical demonstration could have been. She was becoming an idea. The years blurred together after that. Teaching, writing, studying. Nora was promoted to sergeant in 1995, to staff sergeant in 1998. She published her first book in 1999, a tactical analysis of urban combat that became required reading at officer candidate school. She never talked about Bridgeport, never mentioned the demonstration or the program or the 6 Marines she'd incapacitated in 7 seconds. But others talked. The story spread through the Corps like a virus, mutating and evolving with each retelling. Some said she'd fought 10 Marines. Others said 20. Some claimed she'd used weapons. Others insisted it had been staged, fake, propaganda. The truth became legend. The legend became myth. And Nora let it happen. Because myths could accomplish things that facts could not. In September 2001, the world changed. Nora was teaching a class on Soviet tactics when the news came through. A plane had hit the World Trade Center, then another, then the Pentagon. America was under attack, and nobody knew by whom, or why, or when it would end. The Marines in her classroom were young, 20, 21 years old, most of them. They joined during peacetime, attracted by education benefits and career opportunities. None of them had expected war. Now war was inevitable. Class dismissed, Nora said quietly. Go to your units. Get your gear ready. Some of you are going to deploy. Maybe all of you. Remember what I've taught you. Stay smart. Stay alive. Come home. They filed out in silence. Nora stood alone in the empty classroom, staring at the tactical map on the wall, knowing that everything was about to change. She was right. Within months, Marines were in Afghanistan. Within a year, they were preparing for Iraq. And Nora's students, the ones she'd taught to think, to analyze, to see combat as a chess game played with lives, were sending her letters from the front. Staff Sergeant Reeves wrote from Kandahar, "Your lessons on terrain analysis saved my squad last week. We avoided an ambush because I remembered what you taught about reading enemy movement patterns. Thank you." Corporal James Whitmore wrote from Baghdad, "The urban combat tactics you drilled into us are the only reason I'm still alive. Every day I use something you taught me. Every day I survive." Lieutenant Sarah Chen, one of the first female intelligence officers Nora had mentored, wrote from Camp Lejeune, "I'm deploying next month, not to combat officially, but close enough. If women ever get the chance to serve in combat roles, I want to be ready, like you were ready at Bridgeport. Thank you for showing us it was possible." That last letter hit Nora harder than she expected. She was 33 years old. 10 years had passed since Bridgeport. The program had been buried, forgotten by everyone except the people who'd been there. The policy hadn't changed. Women were still banned from direct ground combat. But something had changed. Women were closer to combat than ever before, driving trucks through insurgent territory, flying helicopters into hot zones, treating casualties under fire. The line between combat and support was blurring, and eventually, Nora knew, it would disappear entirely. She just didn't know how long that would take. The answer came in 2013. Nora was 45 years old, a master sergeant now, still teaching at Dam Neck. She'd turned down multiple opportunities for promotion that would have taken her away from the classroom. This was her calling, training the next generation, planting seeds. On January 24, 2013, Defense Secretary Leon Panetta announced that the military would rescind the policy excluding women from combat roles. The ban would be lifted. Women would be allowed to serve in infantry, armor, artillery, every position previously closed to them. Nora heard the news in her office. She sat very still for a long time, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of 20 years settle on her shoulders. Her phone rang. She knew who it would be before she answered. Hartwick, the voice said. The old Marine was 78 years old now, long retired, living in Montana, but his voice was still strong. You hear the news? I heard, Master Sergeant. 20 years, Nora. 20 years since you proved it was possible. And now they're finally catching up. Nora's throat was tight. I wish you were here, Master Sergeant. I wish my father was here. I wish everyone who believed in this could see it. They can see it. Walter can see it. I can see it. Hell, the whole damn Corps can see it now. Hartwick paused. You know what this means, right? They're going to need instructors, people who can train the first generation of female combat Marines, people who understand what it takes. I'm 45 years old, Master Sergeant, too old for combat, too old for most things. You're not too old to teach. You're not too old to pass on what you learned. His voice softened. Nora, you spent 20 years preparing for this moment. Don't stop now. She closed her eyes, thought about Bridgeport, about the North Ridge, in the 7-second fight, in the dream that had been deferred but never abandoned. What do you need me to do, Master Sergeant? What you've always done. Be excellent. Be patient. Be the ghost that haunts their assumptions until those assumptions crumble into dust. 6 months later, Nora received orders to Marine Corps Base Quantico. Special assignment, Female Infantry Integration Advisor. Her job was to help develop the standards, the training protocols, the cultural framework that would allow women to succeed in combat roles. It was the most important work of her life. She arrived at Quantico in August 2013. The base was in chaos, good chaos, the kind that comes from necessary change. Female Marines were already volunteering for the infantry officer course. The first enlisted women were preparing to attend the School of Infantry. The entire institution was being forced to reckon with questions it had avoided for decades. Can women meet the same physical standards as men? Should the standards be adjusted? How do you integrate genders in units that have been exclusively male for 240 years? What about equipment, facilities, cultural resistance? Nora spent 12-hour days in meetings, working groups, planning sessions. She reviewed fitness standards, analyzed injury data, consulted with physiologists and psychologists and combat veterans, and slowly, carefully, she helped build a framework that balanced readiness with opportunity. The key insight, she argued, was that standards should be job-specific, not gender-specific. If a Marine could meet the physical and mental demands of a role, any role, then that Marine should have the opportunity to serve in that role. No exceptions, no quotas, no lowered bars. Just honest assessment of capability. It was a harder argument than she'd expected. Some people wanted to lower standards to ensure women could pass. Others wanted to raise standards to ensure women would fail. Nora fought both impulses with data, with logic, with the patient accumulation of evidence. In December 2013, she was invited to speak at a conference on military integration. The audience was 200 officers, analysts, and policymakers, people who would shape the future of the American military. Nora stood at the podium, looking out at faces that ranged from supportive to skeptical to openly hostile. In 1993, she began, I participated in a training program that was designed to determine whether women could perform in combat roles. The program was classified, unofficial, and ultimately it was shut down before it could produce any formal conclusions. She paused, letting that sink in. But I learned something during that program. I learned that combat isn't about gender, it's about capability, about the ability to think under pressure, to execute with precision, to adapt to chaos. And I learned that the smallest person in the room can still be the most effective if they're properly trained and properly utilized. A hand went up. Rear Admiral James Dutton, Navy, 62 years old. Master Sergeant, are you saying that women are as physically capable as men? No, Admiral. I'm saying that combat requires more than physical capability. It requires intelligence, discipline, creativity, endurance. Women may, on average, have less upper body strength than men, but they may also have advantages in other areas. The question isn't whether women are identical to men. The question is whether women can meet the demands of the job. And can they? Nora smiled. Admiral, I once incapacitated 6 combat veteran Marines in under 10 seconds, using nothing but technique and physics. I weighed 128 pounds. They weighed a combined 1,200. So yes, if trained properly, if held to appropriate standards, if given the opportunity to prove themselves, women can absolutely meet the demands of combat. The room erupted in conversation. Some people were nodding, others were shaking their heads, but everyone was thinking, questioning, reconsidering. That was all Nora needed. The seed planted at Bridgeport 20 years ago was finally beginning to grow. In March 2015, the first female enlisted Marines graduated from the Infantry Training Battalion. 27 women out of an initial class of 40. Not a high percentage, but not zero. Nora attended the graduation ceremony, stood in the back, watching these young women receive their infantry designation, knowing that they would face challenges she'd never faced, that they would fight battles both on the battlefield and within the institution, that some of them would succeed and some would fail, and all of them would be scrutinized in ways their male counterparts never would be. After the ceremony, one of the graduates approached her, Second Lieutenant Kira Winters, 24 years old, top of her class at the infantry officer course. Master Sergeant Blackwell, I wanted to thank you. Nora looked at the young officer, saw the determination in her eyes, the pride in her bearing. Thank me for what, Lieutenant? For fighting before we could, for proving it was possible before any of us even knew we wanted to try. Winters hesitated. My grandmother told me stories about you, about Bridgeport, about how you took down 6 Marines and changed everything. I don't know how much of it's true, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that you made people believe change was possible. Nora's throat tightened. Your grandmother knew me? Colonel Patricia Hayes, retired. She was at Bridgeport in '93, watched your demonstration, said it was the most incredible thing she'd ever seen. Winters smiled. She also said you were the reason she stayed in the Corps, that watching you fight made her believe that someday women would have real opportunities. Not just support roles, real opportunities. Patricia Hayes. Nora remembered the name, one of the few female officers at Bridgeport, relegated to administrative duties, watching from the sidelines as Nora fought. Tell your grandmother thank you, Nora said quietly. And Lieutenant, you're going to face resistance. People who think you don't belong. People who want you to fail. Don't let them define you. Define yourself through excellence. Yes, Master Sergeant. Winters saluted and walked away. Nora stood alone, watching the new infantry Marines disperse to their units, carrying with them the promise of a different future. The years continued their relentless march. 2016, 2017, 2018. More female Marines in combat roles, more success stories, more resistance overcome. Nora retired from the Marine Corps in 2019 at the age of 51, 29 years of service. Master Sergeant, multiple commendations, a legacy of students who'd gone on to lead Marines in combat across the globe. But retirement didn't mean stopping. She became a defense contractor, specializing in close quarters combat training. She taught law enforcement, special operations, private security. She wrote books on tactics and leadership. She gave lectures at military schools around the world. And everywhere she went, people asked about Bridgeport, about the 7-second fight, about the ghost. She never tired of telling the story. Because it wasn't really her story. It was the story of everyone who'd fought for change when change seemed impossible. Everyone who'd believed that capability mattered more than category. In November 2024, Nora received an invitation to speak at the Women's Leadership Summit at Quantico. She almost declined. Public speaking wasn't her strength. and she'd told the Bridgeport story 1,000 times. But the invitation came with a note. Sergeant Rick Donovan will be in attendance. He asked specifically if you would be there. Donovan. Nora hadn't seen him in 31 years, hadn't spoken to him since that final briefing at Bridgeport. She wondered what he looked like now, whether he still carried the confidence of a combat veteran, or whether time had humbled him the way it humbled everyone. She accepted the invitation. The summit was held in late November, during the week of Thanksgiving. 200 women attended, officers, enlisted, veterans, civilians. The theme was Breaking Barriers, and Nora was scheduled to give the keynote address. She arrived early, walking the halls of the Leadership Center, seeing photographs of female Marines from every era, nurses from World War II, clerks from Korea, intelligence officers from the Cold War, and now, finally, infantry Marines, artillery Marines, tankers, special operations. The complete integration that had seemed impossible in 1993 was now simply reality. The moderator introduced Nora with a biography that felt like it belonged to someone else. Master Sergeant Nora Blackwell, USMC retired, 29 years of service, intelligence instructor, tactical analyst, author, advisor to the Female Infantry Integration Program. And then, almost as an afterthought, participant in the classified 1993 Winter Warfare Program at Bridgeport. Nora walked to the podium, looked out at 200 women, all of them leaning forward, all of them waiting to hear what the ghost had to say. Is it true you single-handedly incapacitated 6 United States Marines in under 5 seconds? Nora smiled. Not single-handedly. Someone believed in me when no one else would. She told them about Bridgeport, about Master Sergeant Silas Hartwick and Lieutenant Colonel Wade Ashford, and her father, Walter Blackwell. About training in secret on the North Ridge, learning that precision could defeat strength, that intelligence could overcome size. She told them about the 7-second fight, not bragging, just facts. 6 Marines, 7 seconds. Physics and leverage and the advantage of being underestimated. She told them about the shutdown, about orders to bury the program, to pretend it never happened, to go back to the safe world of intelligence where women belonged. But here's the thing about truth, Nora said, her voice carrying to the back of the auditorium. You can bury it, you can classify it, you can order people not to talk about it, but you can't kill it, because truth has a way of surviving, of spreading, of growing until it can't be ignored anymore. She paused, looking at the faces in the audience. Young faces, determined faces, the faces of women who would carry this fight forward when Nora was too old to carry it herself. In 1993, I proved that women could compete in combat, but the policy didn't change. Not for 20 years. And during those 20 years, I had a choice. I could be bitter, could rage against the injustice, could give up. Or I could prepare, could train the next generation, could plant seeds that would grow when the conditions were finally right. I chose preparation. And now, 31 years later, over 18,000 women serve in combat roles across the United States military. Not because of me, not because of any one person, but because enough people refused to accept that impossible meant impossible forever. The audience was silent. Nora could see some women wiping their eyes. So here's my message to you. You're going to face resistance. You're going to be told you're not strong enough, not fast enough, not good enough. Some of you will fail. That's okay. Failure is part of the process. What matters is that you keep trying, keep proving, keep pushing until impossible becomes inevitable. She stepped back from the podium. The audience rose as one, applauding, some cheering, the sound echoing through the auditorium like thunder. After the speech, Nora stood in the hallway, accepting congratulations, answering questions. And then she saw him. Sergeant Major Rick Donovan, retired. 62 years old now, gray-haired and weathered, but still carrying himself like a combat marine. He approached slowly, and when he got close, he extended his hand. Master Sergeant Blackwell, it's been a long time. They shook hands. His grip was still strong. Sergeant Major Donovan, you look good. You look better. He smiled, and it was genuine. I wanted to come here today to tell you something. Something I should have said 31 years ago. What's that? You were right. About everything. About women in combat. About precision over strength. About the Corps needing to change. He paused. I spent 3 decades as a drill instructor, training new Marines. And every single one of them, I told your story. Told them about the corporal who took down 6 of us because she was smarter, faster, more prepared. Told them that size doesn't matter if you've got skill. Nora felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you, Sergeant Major. No, thank you. Donovan's eyes were serious. You changed my life that day at Bridgeport, made me question everything I thought I knew. I became a better Marine because of you, a better instructor, a better man. He saluted, sharp and precise and heartfelt. Nora returned the salute, and for a moment they were back at Bridgeport, standing in the training pit, the snow falling around them, the future unwritten. Then Donovan lowered his hand and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Lieutenant Kira Winters appeared at Nora's side. Ma'am, that was incredible. The speech, everything. Just the truth, Lieutenant, that's all. Can I ask you something? Something personal? Nora nodded. Do you ever regret it? Spending 20 years teaching instead of fighting? Watching other people get the opportunities you never got? Nora thought about that. Thought about Bridgeport and all the years after. Thought about her students scattered across the globe, leading Marines, making decisions, saving lives with the lessons she'd taught them. No, she said finally, I don't regret it. Because I did fight, just not the way I expected. I fought with ideas instead of weapons, with patience instead of aggression. And in the end, I think I won something more important than any single battle. What's that, ma'am? The future. That evening, Nora drove to Arlington National Cemetery. She walked through the rows of white headstones until she found the one she was looking for. Master Sergeant Silas Hartwick, United States Marine Corps, 1935 to 2018, Semper Fidelis. She stood in front of the stone for a long time, not speaking, just remembering. The North Ridge, the training, the quiet voice teaching her to turn physics into victory. We did it, Master Sergeant, she whispered finally. The rules changed. Women are fighting. Your legacy lives on. The wind moved through the cemetery, rustling the flags on nearby graves. Nora placed her hand on the cold marble. Thank you for keeping your promise to my father. Thank you for believing in me when nobody else would. Thank you for teaching me that change doesn't happen all at once, that sometimes you have to plant seeds and wait for them to grow. She straightened, saluted the grave, and turned to leave. As she walked back toward her car, her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Master Sergeant Blackwell, this is Colonel Winters. My grandmother, Patricia Hayes, passed away last night. She was 89. Before she died, she asked me to tell you something. The ghost of Bridgeport kept me in the fight. Tell her thank you. Nora stopped walking, read the message again, felt tears she'd been holding for 31 years finally break free. She sat on a bench overlooking the cemetery and wept. Not from sadness, from relief. From the knowledge that her fight, the invisible, patient, decades-long fight, had mattered. That the seeds she'd planted had grown into forests. When the tears stopped, she took out her father's K-bar knife. She'd carried it every day for 31 years. The blade was still sharp, the paracord handle still tight. On the blade, beneath her father's name, she'd added another name years ago, Silas Hartwick. Now, using a jeweler's engraving tool she kept in her car, she added a third name, Patricia Hayes. And beneath that, in letters so small they were barely visible, and all who fight in the shadows. She closed the knife and stood. Tomorrow, she'd go back to work, back to training, back to planting seeds. Because the fight wasn't over. It would never be over. There would always be barriers to break, assumptions to challenge, impossible things to make inevitable. But tonight, standing in Arlington Cemetery with her father's knife in her hand and the weight of 3 decades on her shoulders, Nora Blackwell allowed herself to feel something she'd denied herself for too long. Pride. She had fought. She had won. And the ghost of Bridgeport would live forever in the women who came after her, carrying forward the lessons she'd learned on a frozen mountain in California 31 years ago. That precision defeats strength. That intelligence overcomes size. That patience outlasts resistance. And that sometimes the smallest person in the room can change the world. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. The end.